I've just finished reading your report here, and you were spot on in terms of your projection. The figure of 30% is what you have, also saying that the 20% in fentanyl was not removable, so we have 10 plus 20. Can you take us through how you got to that number and what you think of what came out yesterday?
Sure. It was clear from the messaging on both sides that China had gotten a pretty good deal. And it was actually clear starting late last week, there was a really amazing shift in the tone from President Trump from Wednesday to Thursday when, Wednesday he said flatly no when asked if he would possibly bring the tariffs down to kickstart negotiations. And then on Thursday, for some reason, his tone changed quite dramatically. So there are a number of potential factors that could have driven that shift. But clearly, the U.S., I think, went into this weekend's meeting deciding that it wanted to dial back the pressure on China for at least the time being.
Okay, and a dial back they have, and the market seems to like it as well. But how has this addressed any of the underlying issues? The fact that it was the trade deficit that the U.S. is very unhappy about.
Sure. Well, there are all kinds of sort of conflicting objectives that have been thrown out there, from raising revenue to bringing jobs back to America to reindustrializing. But the clip you showed before I came on is really the key one. I think the driving force in all of this is the policy of strategic decoupling from China. And what that entails, as laid out by former U.S. Trade Rep Bob Lighthizer quite clearly, is no trade with China in critical industries. And that list currently looks like steel, aluminum, copper, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and that semiconductor bucket now also includes cellular telephones and a lot of computer equipment. So it's a fairly long list of product areas where we want to break a dependence with China, and will be soliciting trade partners in that effort. And this was a key thing that came out of the US-UK deal on Thursday, that there was a lot of verbiage about working together to address non-market practices, about working together to secure supply chains in these critical areas. And, Howard Lutnick last week made a comment about the fact that the UK was exempted from the US steel tariffs because they're going to be in, to use Lutnick's words, a walled garden to keep out the bad guys, is actually what he said. So it's clear that this policy of strategic decoupling will decouple the two economies in these critical industries. And then the everything else bucket, non-critical industries, the U.S. is, I believe, bound and determined to balance the trade via either tariffs or negotiated purchases of more Chinese goods to balance the trade of what's left. So that's the U.S. objective. I think it's going to be highly problematic from China. And one of the amazing dynamics coming out of the weekend was, while it is clear that over the weekend the U.S. gave a lot more than they got, the side that gave a lot more is talking very nicely, and the side that supposedly got a lot more still seems quite annoyed with the situation.
Now, I want to ask you about this being a big win for China this weekend. You've alluded this to being a baseball game, and we're in the third inning, and China's still down 8-3. Can you tell us a little bit more about this baseball game that we are watching? I believe there's 9 innings in a baseball game.
Yeah, there's 9 innings. And the comments you just quoted from President Xi, the line about bullying came across just before I came on and really caught my eye. And it goes to my point that China still seems aggrieved. I think they will take this strategic decoupling policy as they will interpret it as something that is meant to constrain China's development, which is a red line that's been crossed here. So this is an economic war that is really part of a geopolitical struggle for global leadership. Whichever side can break the dependence economically on the other side then has sort of the control of the geopolitical chessboard. And that is really what this is about. And obviously none of that stuff was resolved this weekend. So when I say the U.S. is still ahead, while Trump certainly gave ground over the weekend, the fact of the matter is, relative to 3 months ago, U.S. tariffs on China are considerably higher than they were. And on net, China hasn't retaliated at all. And in fact, the current Chinese tariffs, the current U.S. tariffs on China are what China would have had if they had never retaliated on April 2nd in the first place, because everyone else has this 10% as well. So really, Trump has moved the ball quite considerably from day one, although there was a considerable retreat this weekend. I think, U.S. small businesses, many were, the tariffs went up too quickly, too high, too quickly for many small businesses to cope. So, they'll get a window now to get goods out of China, but they're also going to be moving supply chain, and this is going to go on for quite some time.